Mark, thank you so much. And thank you all so much for being here today to show by your very presence how deeply we hold these principles that animate every one of your organizations. So before we go any further, you all evening long will be applauding speaker after speaker after speaker. And please feel free to applaud this one in about 8 minutes. Before we go any further, for all the work you do every day, every week, and here tonight, give yourselves a round of applause because you deserve it and you're part of the answer. So my name is Dan Schnur, and I have been teaching at the University of Southern California and the University of California from Berkeley for many, many years. Classes in politics, classes in communications, and classes in leadership. And one of the things I've learned when studying and teaching leadership to extraordinary young people is that while Mark is exactly right in reminding us, as he said, how things get worse, the best leaders also remind their followers, and we remind each other, that things get better. And how can I say that with confidence? Because history offers evidence of angry times, of frightening times. And history offers equally compelling evidence of brave women and brave men who lead the frightened through those times to something better. A few years ago, we had a family reunion, the Schnurs. 200 Schnurs and Schnur derivatives, I guess you could call us. And we gathered in a room almost as gorgeous as this one, in the Catskills, just outside of New York. And on the wall of that room, there was a photograph, a large blown-up photograph of 8 children. A photograph that was taken in Austria in the early 1930s. And one little boy in that photograph was my grandpa. The other 7 were my great-aunts and great-uncles, his brothers and sisters. Fortunately, for all 200 of us in the room, 4 of those children emigrated from Austria to this country in the 1930s when they could. Their 4 older siblings waited. And when they tried to come to the United States a decade later, they were turned away. I teach my students about a quote from the American philosopher and humorist Mark Twain. Mark Twain said, "History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes." My great-aunts and great-uncle weren't called terrorists. They were called Nazi spies. And they were called communist provocateurs. And it was explained to them by by representatives of this country's government that we understood the suffering that they might face if sent back to their home country, but that we had to worry first and foremost about the safety and security of the American people. So we couldn't take the risk of letting in spies and provocateurs into this country without taking every appropriate precaution to make sure the homeland had been safe. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And if you look back through this country's history, what you see predictably, recurringly, and constantly is an ongoing cycle. And what you see is a cycle of welcoming followed by a cycle of intolerance, and what drives the cycle of intolerance are economic downturns and periods of war. And if you look at our country's most recent history, in which we continue to fight the longest war in American history, if you look at a long and difficult economic recession followed by an unsatisfying and uneven recovery, it shouldn't be that surprising that just as after World War I, we turned inward. Just as after World War II, we turned inward. After Korea, after Vietnam, after the first Iraqi war, we built walls. The only difference is those walls were figurative and attitudinal, but the emotions driving those walls were just the same. And so here we sit in 2018, in the aftermath, in the middle of those economic and military challenges. And it shouldn't come to us as any surprise at all that so many of our fellow Americans turn inward and look to push away the rest of the world. We see it on issues of immigration. We see it in the news today on issues of trade. And of course, we see it in a most heartrending and unjust way when it comes to men and women and children who want to come here not just for economic opportunity and for family reunification, but refugees fleeing for their very lives. So, we haven't been here before, but we as a country, we as a society, we as a community, we've been here before. We've been here before, and we know what to do. What I tell my students, and what all of you know, otherwise you wouldn't be in this room tonight, is that frightened people run away from the things that scare them. Frightened children run away from the things that scare them. Frightened countries run away from the things that scare them, and we're seeing that right now. But leaders walk toward those scary things. And before leaders walk toward those scary things, they turn to the frightened people on either side of them, on their left and on their right. And they reassure those frightened people. And we remind them that if we walk toward those scary things together, that's how we win. Now here's the challenge of leadership, and this is the one to forget when you live in angry times. It's really easy when you see so much anger and so much hatred. It's really, really easy to concentrate all of our time and all of our energies on those angry people. But I know, as most of you know, I know as a parent and I know as a teacher, that underneath most angry people are frightened people. And rather than wasting our time, rather than wasting our energy, rather than wasting our emotional determination on the small number of haters, how much better, how much more valuable is it to spend our time reaching out not to the hateful, but to the frightened, and growing our numbers. So when a room like this feels like you have all filled it today, when we reach out to others next time, on the left and the right, not hateful people, not angry people, but frightened people, and remind them that being frightened of the other is understandable. But the people who we're talking about tonight, they're not the other. They're us. And if we walk toward those scary things together with them, that's how we win. So keep doing what you're doing and do more of it. But if the people in this room have one flaw and it's one flaw only, there aren't enough of us. And we don't have the luxury of selective outrage or selective outreach. There are frightened people on the left and on the right. There are frightened people in the red and the blue. And I would a million times rather be slapped back by one hateful, angry person than miss the 5, the 10, the 50, or 100 who might not agree with me on taxes or other issues of the day. Reach out in both directions. Reach out in all directions. Fill this room in rooms much, much larger than this. This isn't red or blue, it's something much bigger and it's something more important. Keep doing what you're doing, my friends, and do more of it. And give yourselves one more round of applause because you deserve it. Thanks so much.